All right, hello, Flight Sim community. This is Beetle Beast, and we are currently in Flight Sim 2024. We're going to do a quick tutorial flight in the Cessna 172. Just a little bit of backstory here. This flight is coming about because of a question that was posed on Reddit, in which somebody was trying to figure out how to go more in depth in the learning process of the Cessna 172, specifically in the career mode and the avionics. This person had gone through the tutorials on the avionics, and they said that everything always worked fine when it came to the avionics in the tutorial, but they were kind of lost with going anywhere outside of that. So I figured, you know what? Let me try the tutorial. So I did, and it is a very basic introduction to making a needle point in a specific direction. There's a couple more for actual general control of the aircraft in IFR, which is all good stuff. But when it comes to how to operate the systems, they just kind of leave it up to you to figure it out. What's kind of cool about this, the G1000 is really well designed inside of Flight Sim 2024. So you've got a lot of functionality there, but it's not necessarily 100% intuitive as to how to get to some of the things. I mean, some of it's just a little bit off. So this one here is going to be a very easy flight. We're going to fly it using the GPS navigation, which is what you find in the career mode of Flight Sim. Waypoints are going to be preloaded essentially for you. We're going to load one up right now just so you guys can see how it's done. But otherwise, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So we're going to utilize the EFB that's here in Flight Sim 2024, which I love the way it works. For the most part, there's some things that don't work so well, but we're not really going to be here talking about that. What we're going to talk about right now is how to set it up for a typical flight. So this cruising altitude here, I've already got 5,000 feet set in there. When I originally spawned in, this thing had 10,000 feet set in. I think that's kind of unrealistic on a 60-mile flight, 70-mile approximately flight. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take it back and we're going to put in 5,000. It only works off of flight levels. It does not work off of feet. So make sure you have that set up as a flight level. So 50 equals 5,000 feet. If you were to put in 500, that would be equal to 50,000 feet. 350 is equal to 35,000 feet for airliners and stuff like that. But 5,000 will work. So 50 for 5,000 feet. If you swap it over to feet, it doesn't necessarily correspond with the way the flight plans get filed, and then ATC requests you to climb to like 500,000 feet. So don't do that. That'll break it. Okay, so moving on, you've got your departure airport in here, departure runway. You can change that to your liking. The winds are out of the north, so this should work out pretty well. Procedure here, straight out departure. You can change that, and I will tell you that Flight Sim does some really funky things with these departures, and I'll just say that as it is. Some of these don't show up quite right. You're going to get the little these little blue boxes that are going to show you where they expect you to fly to, and a lot of times those are going to show up with flight path attitudes that are all completely unrealistic for a Skyhawk. They'll be unrealistic for the Caravan as well. They would work out great if you're in a rocket ship. They'd work out great if you're in a Learjet, but outside of those things, or maybe a 757. Outside of those, you're not going to achieve them, and the passengers would be terribly uncomfortable anyway. So we're going to skip that. Don't worry about it. You'll see it when we load in. Find route. If you click it and there was a route available, it would show up. There isn't one, so it's not going to show up, but we're going to add some waypoints in. The first one that we're going to use here is actually this fix called SOSO, sorry. It is on a T route that we're going to be flying along. Which, let's see if I can skip that level and just go in with an airway. Can I just click the airway? Airway. Yeah, no, I guess you can't. So you're going to have to start it somewhere, which kind of makes sense. So I'm going to start it with SOSO, and then I'm going to add a waypoint here because I'd like to fly up an airway. So let's go with this airway, and then we can select T365, and I'm going to take it up until we reach the Obuji intersection right there. Add that, and then I'm going to do an arrival, not an arrival, but an approach for only 3-4 left. We'll do the ILS for 3-4 left, and we'll do that from, oh, look at that. We can do it from Obuji and just fly an arc on the arrival. That'll be perfect. That should work. So with that, we can click this button here saying File to ATC. That makes our flight plan actually show up here on the map, and Microsoft's ATC system will then be talking to us if we want them to, and we don't because they suck. Really, Microsoft, you guys need a refund on whoever created the dialogue. Nobody says runway 34L in real life. Doesn't happen. You guys got scammed. All right. Moving on from that, though, send route to avionics. Yes, we're going to click that. That's going to load the flight plan into the G1000 system. Like I said, in so many ways, I do really like the interface of the EFB. Inside of the career mode, certain things don't seem to work, specifically the fuel. You can't seem to add fuel correctly. It doesn't show up. And the route does some funky things every once in a while, including altitudes that are unobtainable for the airplane. So you kind of do have to look at it, but this is where all the information shows up when you start doing your career modes in your flights. So we can close this out now. You can get an idea as to what our flight plan is going to look like. We're going to take off here from Laurel, Mississippi, flying up to Jackson, Mississippi, along this route of flight. There's our arc, and then shooting the ILS approach into Jackson. And without too much further ado, let's go ahead and get this started. Looks really clear and pretty today. I thought I had weather set up to be kind of crummy IFR, which means I'm going to have to probably change it so that it becomes crummy IFR. We're going to fix that here in just a second. Yep, weather must have reset. What a beautiful day. We need more clouds. Yes, like that. And we want this to be lower. Lower, not that low. Okay. How about something like that? That should work out good. Beautiful. Now it's terrible looking outside. All right. So as you can see right in front of us here, we do have a really funky looking set of blue lines. Like I said, ATC inside of Flight Sim 2024. I don't know what they've done with this, but it doesn't look right. Don't bother with it. We're going to turn it off anyway because guess what? We don't really need it. And hopefully after we have done this little tutorial, you won't need it either. Okay, so things to look at real quick while we're in the cockpit. Airplane's running on the runway. You can see on our navigational chart here, this is where we're at, this is where we're going. So we're at runway 31 to depart. We're going to SOSO, that's our first fix. We can go ahead and straighten out our heading bug. Here's the distance to that fix. Here's the bearing to that fix. So if you're looking at any of this stuff, that's what you need to see. We need to choose an altitude that we're going to climb up to here, and we're going to use the pre-selector for that. So let's put in, say, 5,000 feet. That was our planned altitude anyway. Your V speeds are posted here, your rotation speed, your VX speed, VG speed. So I'm not actually sure what your VG is. Oh, it's probably best glide. Yeah. I thought it was always 65 knots in the Skyhawk, but 68 in this one at this weight, and 74 for VY, best angle of climb, or best rate of climb. Best angle of climb is 62. And we could talk about that in a different lesson if someone already hasn't covered it. I'm not going to worry about it right now, but basically 74 knots is the speed we're going to want to climb at. So down here, I am going to open up. Yeah, we won't really be needing it because we're only going to be doing this as a GPS departure. We'll shoot the conventional ILS. So I might add, yeah, let's go ahead and bring it up. So if I come up here to ADF DME, we'll make sure DME set up for nav1. That'll be fine. We can turn that off. And then map HSI. No, not that one. I'm close. I know PFD options. DME will turn that on so that we'll be able to see it. I've got the synthetic vision turned off just because it feels like cheating still. Definitely feels like cheating with the paths on. You don't need them. And like I said, they do some strange things. So I'm going to turn them off, and we're going to do this a little bit more basic as you can in a G1000 equipped airplane. So we have our speeds posted, our altimeter set up. We're 2992 today. We're going up to 5,000 feet. We've got our navigational source set up here. Right now, we are directly on the line. As we move forward, that line here is going to end up coming a little bit to the right because we're going to end up to the left of our course. We'll have to come back to the right in order to capture the course. We currently don't have flight director on, but we can go ahead and turn that on. And since we've got it in roll mode, it's going to roll wings level. And then we're going to select it in pitch mode and just select a pitch attitude up. 5 degrees is fine, but you know what? Let's go up a little higher. Let's go to about a 7.5 degrees nose up. All right, that should pretty well set us up in the airplane. So let's get ourselves to flying. Brakes coming off. Make it so we can kind of see some things. And power's coming up. All right. We're rolling. Keep tracking that center line. Airspeed's alive. At 55 knots, we'll start a very nice slow rotation. Airplane's climbing. I'm going to go ahead and sync the pitch. It looks like we need something closer to about 8 degrees nose up attitude. Maybe a little bit more. Go with almost 10. So we're right about there. All right, we're going to go with flaps up. All right. And like I said, we are in roll mode, so we're going to go ahead and select the nav mode function. And you could have taken off with nav already. And then that's going to go ahead and tell us to turn to the right in order to intercept that course. Very simple, very straightforward. So a little right turn, and now we will join up on that course. Now you will have to go a little further than where it shows, but if you're following the V-bars, they're going to work pretty well. If you got yourself really off course, you might need a large intercept angle. Here, because we were just barely airborne, you're not going to need much of anything. All right, so there it is. There's our waypoint coming up here in 3 seconds. And we're going to start making a left turn back on course to join the airway, the Enroute T365. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the autopilot just for the sake of argument. And we can hopefully talk a little bit more about some of the functionality here as we climb out on this route. So autopilot button, of course, is right here. It's the one labeled AP. FD over here, just to the right of it, is your flight director. That's going to turn on and turn off this little bar. You actually can't turn it off when you're in autopilot because the autopilot needs it in order to go. These are the different modes that you have. The ones here on the left are your lateral navigation modes. So you have a heading mode and a nav mode. If you click on the mode that you're already in, it's going to kick it back to what's called roll mode, ROL, as you see right there. Basically, that means you're going to have wings set to whatever your roll attitude was at the moment that you set it. Re-engaging nav turns on the GPS. Similarly, going to heading mode puts it into a heading follow. It's going to follow this little blue heading bug that's right there. By turning your heading to the right, it'll navigate to the right. By turning it to the left, it'll follow the bug back to the left. If you follow it to the right and you get yourself off course enough so that this little bar here in the middle for your GPS navigation isn't accurate, you may have to command it back to the left in order for it to intercept. So I'll try to see if I can get that off a little bit and see if we can make it so you have to command it back over to the left in order to intercept and join up. Fly here on this heading. If I click nav right now, it might try to just re-grab it. I'm hoping that it won't. Let's see. Nope, it's going to try to just grab it. We're too close to it, essentially. I want to take us a little bit further off course here. Make us work for it. Lower the nose a little bit so that we can gain a little bit of speed back. And let's try it again. All right, see, there we go. So now you've got the GPS mode armed, but the heading is still the active mode because this course is not going to re-intercept, and we're too far off course for the computer to simply say, all right, I need to go to the left and grab it. But you can make it do it. So we're going to turn it to the left. The typical recommendation, if you are majorly off course, is to keep your intercept angle within 30 degrees of your desired course. So we're going to go and just we're not that far off, but I'm going to give it about a 30-degree intercept. Let the airplane go in this direction. Once the course starts to come back in and it gets close enough for the GPS to grab it, the GPS will most likely turn further left, grab the course, and then it'll kind of waffle back and forth a little bit as it tries to get through. So if you guys keep watching it, that's what's going to happen. So we've got the nav mode armed. GPS is set up. It will eventually load in and grab that GPS. Then we have the VNAV function here, which we can talk about that. With the VNAV on, it's going to follow a vertical path. We should be able to see that during the approach mode of flight. I'll definitely try my best to make sure that you guys get a chance to see it. There's outs as we level off here at 5,000 feet. APR, that's the approach mode. We will be utilizing that when we switch over for the ILS a little bit later on. Nice and easy. It's a pretty chill mode of flight. It will use the approach mode for GPS versions of the approaches or RNAV approaches. It will also make the switch from GPS navigation to conventional short-range navigation or green needles when you are making an ILS approach. It did exactly what I thought it would. A little bit further turn to the left, then it's going to come back here and join up on the course to the right. So by having the approach mode armed, you need it armed in order to get the approach sensitivity, basically meaning that the needles, these down here on our CDI, are going to become significantly more sensitive as you get closer to the runway. That way, small deviations from center cause a greater deviation of the approach needles, essentially making you more accurate on the approach. That's what you're looking for. Vertical speed is a climb mode. We'll be using this one for climbs and descents. Flight level change is a climb mode or a descent mode, but it's an airspeed hold. We could have used it in the climb by clicking it. You have the ability to select the speed that you want, not the little Y there, but you can control it. You know what? And in order to demonstrate that, we're going to go ahead and climb to 6,000 feet. I'm going to hit flight level change, and you can see that speed bug is going to hold 91 knots. So it's going to make a climb here at 91 knots, which is about what we were already doing. By increasing the power, the airplane is going to want to increase its airspeed, and that's going to make the nose come up, and then it's going to be climbing in this speed mode. If I want to climb, say, at 74 knots, all you have to do is hit this nose down button right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit clearer. And then you just select it down until you get to the speed that you want. Note that the pitch attitudes might become excessive as it's attempting to find it, and then it's going to have to push the nose back over in order to maintain that new speed. But it's great for going up. It doesn't work nearly as well for going down because suddenly you have to control this rate of descent, which normally you have an idea as to what you actually want to fly for your rate of descent based off of the speed, and therefore you're adjusting power in order to find a rate of descent that works. For a climb, you simply get the best performance you can at a given speed, so this works out really well for that. I'm going to end up descending back down to 5,000 feet, but we'll use vertical speed for that one, and you can see the airplane do that as well. Back course here, BC, not really going to be used for a whole lot of approaches, but there are locations around the world where shooting an ILS approach, ground-based precision approach, is utilized. There's only one antenna essentially. So as a result, you have an antenna that sends out a signal in one direction, and the antenna sends out a signal in the opposite direction. By using back course, you can utilize that opposite direction signal in order to land at an airport. They're really rare. You don't see them that often anymore. I think I've only shot maybe 4 of them in my career, and I've been flying for about 20 years. So you use them. They don't happen that often. And when you're using them via an HSI, such as this, you don't get what's known as reverse sensing. And by using that back course button, that guarantees that you don't get reverse sensing. It also gets rid of the false glide slope indication that comes off of the ILS in the opposite direction. That way you don't follow it and die. That's basically what it's for. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pull power back a little bit. And let's demonstrate both versions of this descent. So if I was to want a 1,000 foot per minute descent, which we're going to say we want 1,000 foot per minute descent, I'm going to take this big knob, scroll it down to 5,000 feet. And I'm going to click flight level change. I want to have 1,000 feet per minute descent. I'm pulling the power back, and I'm getting 750 feet a minute. Now it's increasing to 950. There's 1,000. Now 1050, which means I need a little bit more power in order to maintain that 1,000. 1,100. Okay, now we're at 950. So we're close, but we're not quite there. Okay, now if I hit vertical speed and simply select 1,000 feet per minute, now I'm going to get a descent at 1,000 feet per minute. I'm going to get the descent rate that I want. My speed's going to increase, and if I want to control my speed, I can do that with a little bit of a power adjustment. And it's significantly easier for you to kind of make very small adjustments and maintain your speed than it is for you to make small adjustments and maintain your rate. Hence the reason that we typically don't use flight level change for descents. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense for you guys. So anyway, just as an FYI. The other thing that I was kind of talking about here, see exactly where we're at. We're at Mizzy intersection. We'll go ahead and increase our power so that we can level off here at 5,000 feet. I brought up this DME box. So DME stands for distance measuring equipment. Essentially, it is used to identify the range, as they call slant range, from a VOR. So if you look at a VOR and we look at our altitude, it's going to tell us how far away we are from that VOR, if it's under reception, if they can get to it, and the VOR has DME associated with it. You'll be able to see how far you are away on your route. So here in this particular aircraft, of course, we're using GPS navigation. So we know that we are 31.6 miles from Obuji intersection. I'll scroll this out so you can see it. There's Obuji. That's where we're going to start our arrival. However, if you were to fly this thing on this regular approach going into Jackson, you wouldn't have the ability to know your distance from some of these other waypoints if you're using the ILS, which we're going to be using, which is why I have this DME up. The DME will become important, though, for flying IFR on an airway, whether that be a Victor route or a jet airway, and you're trying to go from point to point, and you need to verify your distance via DME from a facility. So there will be crossover points. You can check your distance to a specific waypoint. You can report a waypoint based off of the distance, even if you didn't have GPS installed in the airplane. So we'll do that on our next leg when we fly it over to Meridian. But I have it up right now because some of these fixes on this approach, from Faven to Dabby to the runway, are going to be identified based off of the DME source, and that's why we have this here. Right now, the DME set off of DME 1, which is the one up here. If I was to put in, let's see, the fix here, 13.2 is Magnolia VOR. Let's see if we can find that. So I'm going to scroll in, 13, scroll down, 0.2, swap it over. There it goes. That shows that we are now 49 miles from the Magnolia VOR, which most likely will match up because if we were to take this distance here, subtract off this distance here, that fix is going to be about 20 miles away. And look at that, 28.8, 48.8, it's almost exactly 20 miles away. The difference here, and I mentioned slant range very briefly, the distance that we are from the VOR is measured in slant range. So basically the 5,000 feet that we're currently at to the ground where the VOR is at, and it's measuring that angle, kind of like a triangle. So you're that far away from it based off of your altitude. If you're higher, that slant range is going to be greater. If you're lower, the slant range is going to be less. When you're directly over the VOR, you could still be a mile away from the VOR because your slant range is going to be slightly different. The math doesn't work out here where it's actually that much of an increase because of the angle at which we're at and the altitude at which we're at. But it does change as altitude increases. So just as an FYI. GPS distance, however, is talking about actual range, physical range between this waypoint and that waypoint as a straight line. So this one here is going to be significantly more accurate. It is, like I said, GPS. It's not using radio signals in order to find out where you're at. The other cool thing about DME, back in the day, they actually had the ability to take your DME and get ground speeds off of it, so you could actually figure out time to distance, time to go. If you're flying an ARC, you might be in a situation where you'll never reach it because you're going to be flying directly around it with a 0 ground speed towards the fix. But it took the slant range distance and then found out the rate of change off of it and then give you a ground speed as a byproduct. All right, so while we're sitting here, let's go ahead and take some time to talk about this approach that we'll be shooting, because we are going to be shooting the instrument approach at Jackson. So we'll be doing this ILS runway 34 left. We're going to be doing it off of Obuji, which will be a 20 DME arc. The localizer frequency is 109.3, which I had previously up over here. I'm going to go ahead and swap it back just for the sake of argument so I don't lose it. 109.3 will be our localizer frequency. Our final approach course will be 339 degrees, and we'll cross the Dabby intersection at 1,800 feet. we're going to have a conditional ILS-DA of 529 feet, and that would increase if we don't have the current altimeter setting at the airfield at which we're going to. Airport elevation is 346 feet. There's going to be an MSA of 3,500 feet. That's a minimum safe altitude of 3,500 feet from the Magnolia VOR. If we happen to go missed approach, it's going to be a climb to 1,200 feet, a climbing right turn to 3,000 feet on a heading of 070, outbound on the Magnolia VOR radial 134 to the Rankin intersection and hold. And we will enter that hold with a teardrop entry, 314 inbound. If you're wondering more about that, I've got another video out there with the ProLine 21 navigation, and we talk a little bit about hold entry and what a hold looks like, how you join up on it, etc. Hopefully I went in detail on that. If I didn't, feel free to put it in the comments, and we can talk about that later. That could be a whole separate video. And I hate holds. I hate holds with a passion. I hated learning them. They make significantly more sense as an adult who's done this for a long time, but yeah, learning them, that sucked. Okay. So moving on here, let's say there was going to be an obstacle off to the west. That shouldn't be much of a factor. We talked about that arc. So what we're going to fly is this 20 DME arc right there from Obuji to Faven. Faven is the intermediate fix on this approach, and then we'll have an intermediate segment from Faven to Dabby. Dabby's going to double up as the final approach fix, but we are limited to 3,500 feet on the arc. Once we come inbound from Faven to Dabby, we can go down to 1,800 feet, and then we're going to follow the glide slope all the way down to essentially a 200-foot DA. We need 1,800 RVR to shoot the approach. We should have that. And we should definitely break out 529 feet. I think the ceilings are something like 700 feet, so we should definitely break out on this approach and be able to see the runway. And that's going to take me to one of my gripes that I have actually on the career mode of Flight Sim 2024. You have the ability to dispatch to fly to airports based off of, and they'll report it. Hey, the airport is low IFR. A lot of the airports that they will dispatch you to, though, don't have weather reporting on the field. That part I don't care about. The issue is it's a low IFR airport, and you have no idea how low the IFR is. So if you go off to an airport that says it's low IFR, and you're going to go ahead and get the bad weather mission bonus for flying to that airport, the airport may or may not have an instrument approach procedure going to it in the first place, and if it doesn't, you may not be able to see the airport and land. So your only option is to essentially fly with synthetic vision in almost a 0-0 situation all the way down to the quote-unquote runway. The problem is that if you were to do that in real life, you're going to kill yourself. And if you did that, of course, in the game, it doesn't give you the option for a career mode that's trying to harp on realism. It doesn't give you the realism because, all honesty, what you're going to do is you're going to divert to a different airport that is nearby, take on a little bit of gas, wait for the weather to get better, and then you're going to fly on to your destination airport without a penalty. Inside of the game, it doesn't give you that option. If you don't fly and land at the destination airport, the mission isn't completed. And I think that's something that could be a very easy update. You just got to change the parameters for how the game measures it. Give that option to wait out the weather, and it'll be perfect. Do that, Microsoft, you'll improve your product here about 100%, at least on the realism front. But yeah, that works out pretty well. That's what I would recommend. All right, so we are currently, let's see here, 18 miles from Obuji. As we said already, we're going to be 3,500 feet or above when we fly on the Obuji leg. I'll make sure that, you know what, let's see if we can put in, we go into our flight plan here. That's not going to show up, is it? Aha, there we go. Obuji, I'd love to put an altitude in there. And I see the button for it. Oh, not what I wanted to do. All right, anyway, like I said, that's what I was hoping to do. I was hoping to put in an altitude at Obuji so I could set up to cross it at 3,500 feet. The unfortunate is I don't think it's going to let me do that, so I'm just going to put it in here. So we'll plan to start a descent around 5 miles from Obuji to hit it at 3,500 feet. That should keep us well within the MSA as well. And then we'll join up on the arc at Obuji, and we're going to let the GPS fly the arc. So only a few more miles to go. I'll be quiet for a second, and you guys can enjoy some external views of the airplane flying through clouds. All right, so here we are, back in the airplane. We're going to start that descent. Meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out if my sim rate has increased too much. We'll find out in just a second, I'm sure. So about a 500 foot per minute descent should work fairly well for us. We have about 1,000 feet to go, 3 miles to go. That works out to be a 3-degree glide path down to our 3,500 feet. All right, so Abuchi is going to start off here with that left-hand turn, and then we're going to have a very slow, gradual right-hand turn as we go all the way around to the fixed Faven. And we're going to stay in the GPS form of navigation inside of Faven until we are approaching Dabby, at which point in time I'm going to arm the approach mode, and the airplane is going to intercept and go from these pink magenta needles over to the green needles of short-range ground-based navigation. All right, here comes that left turn. Now, flying an arc, and I'll probably do one when we go over on the next leg doing the entire thing via ground-based navigation on the next tutorial. But flying an arc in a non-GPS environment is a whole other fun level of figuring out where you're at. It's really pretty straightforward when you're doing it with a good moving map here, such as what we have. But if you're flying in an old-school airplane, it's fun. And it will kind of teach you to figure out where you're at and what you're doing. Here we are. We're going to Faven. As you can tell, so I resynced that heading bug when we first joined up here on Abuchi. And since then, that heading bug has worked its way off to the left. And that's because we've been gradually making that right turn to remain on that 20 DME arc that's coming off of the Magnolia VOR. So if you were to extend that line, it'll go all the way around Magnolia VOR here, 20 miles away. I'm kind of thinking that I might still be in one-time acceleration here. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like we might be. I'd have to time it in order to see if we really are. And I don't see myself timing it, so I might just slow it down once on final, and we might have to kick it up one notch. But that little bump just looked as if it was still time accelerated. Oh, it looks very stormy and rainy out there. Yeah. Yeah, don't go that way. Too late. We're going that way. All right, so here comes Faven. Yeah, I'm going to say that we're now at accurate time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start that descent down. 500 feet per minute once again. We'll just go ahead and... Oh, I didn't put the 1,800 feet in. My apologies. So we're going down to 1,800 feet here at the FAF of Dabby. And like I said, prior to getting to the FAF, we're going to make sure we arm the approach mode. We could arm it right now. I will guarantee you that we will get a transfer over. But yeah, that's going to be about it for that. Ooh, and you know what? I'm going to change something. I just realized the DME fixes that are coming up on here for Dabby and MHZ, they're actually going to be used from the Magnolia VOR. So we're going to have to make a quick change real quick. ADF DME. Scroll down here and switch that to nav2. And after doing that, let's close that out. I'm going to come in here, click this one, and we're going to put 13.2 back in. And I'm going to swap that over. So now I can see where I'm at based off of that VOR. That's what I want to be at. So now we are 18.3 miles from the VOR. Just as an FYI, Favin, of course, is 20 miles. And Dabby intersection will be 12.8 miles from the Magnolia VOR. So we're going to keep this descent going down towards our runway. Looks like we have a little bit of a left crosswind here. Shouldn't be much of a factor. And once we get to the FAF, I think I'll hand fly it the rest of the way. We're 1,000 feet above our altitude at Dabby, however you want to pronounce it. Anyway, that should work out. So an old trick that I was taught when it comes to flying in ILS, if you're utilizing the heading bug, your heading shouldn't have to turn much more than the edge of the heading bug in order to maintain your localizer positioning. This one will be the localizer. There'll be a glide slope that'll show up right up here as a little diamond. If you are turning more than that, you're going to be chasing this localizer left and right down the final approach course. You don't want that. You want to keep it very small, very minute corrections, and the width of a heading bug is normally more than enough to keep you accurate. Additionally, the closer you get to the ILS antenna, the localizer antenna, the more sensitive and accurate it's going to become. Slightly going off center line on the runway with the glide slope, or sorry, with the localizer captured, will cause a drastic movement on the needles themselves. So just FYI, we should be able to take a look at that as we go forward. I'm going to go ahead and swap this over to the approach mode. There is that nav transfer. You are now captured on the localizer and our altitude. Here's your glide slope coming in. I'm going to go ahead and put in the first notch of flaps. And our missed approach altitude is going to be 3,000 feet if we have to do the missed. One down on the glide slope. Slowing the power back just a little bit. We should see 12.8 miles here on that DME. When we approach the final approach fix of Dabby. All right, glide slope's captured up. There is the tone for the outer marker beacon. Little O shows up right there, 12.8 miles. We were just leaving 1,800 feet, which matches the altitude for the glide slope at Dabby. I promised you the autopilot will be off, and there it is. Autopilot's off. Now we're flying the airplane. All right, so you just put the airplane right there in the V-bars. It should hold itself pretty well on the approach path. Add an extra 10 degrees of flaps. Pay no attention to the moving around of the head, causing a little bit of discomfort. We're going to fly the approach a little bit fast, only because Skyhawks are significantly more stable if you're a few knots above the normal approach speed of 65 knots. So I tend to fly it at about 70 to 75. It's a nice happy medium. And we probably aren't going to reconfigure. We can, and we can determine that on the ground or as we get closer to the ground. But I've only got 20 degrees of flaps in. The airplane will land just fine with 20 degrees of flaps, even at 65 knots. We're a little bit off of that localizer, so we're going to go ahead and just go a little bit left, and it's coming right back in. So there we go. Holding that glide slope really pretty. Drifted a little right. Like I said, right at the edge of that heading bug. Anything more than that, and you're chasing. Now, if you take a look, there's a little magenta diamond directly above my heading bug. That's the actual path of the course. If you can keep that right on top of your green needle, that'll take you all the way there as well. We're going down to 529 feet. We're about 400 feet above the minimums at this time. 500 feet above the ground. A lot of turbulence down here for what's essentially a calm day. I'm actually really annoyed that someone put this much turbulence. I literally have like none. Good lordy. All right, and we're about 100 feet from the minimums. We'll see if we see anything. Nothing yet. I got the runway. There's the minimums. Wow, I did not expect this to be a right down to minimums type of approach, but clearly it was. Winds look very calm down here on the ground. I'm going to blame the rain for all that crazy jerkiness. Good Lord. All right, well, hey, that was successful. That was way more work than it should have been at the end, though. Good Lordy. All right. Let's see if I can demonstrate that localizer. We'll see if it accurately represents it. I'm going to go ahead and turn off of the center line of the runway. And you can see it steps off a little bit. In other simulators that I've done, specifically the old Frascas, it was significantly more sensitive. But yeah, that's what a very small deviation actually looks like. See it over here again. That's how far off you can be and still be kind of on the edge. So at the edge of the runway, that's basically half-scale deviation. So just as a, if you're trying to figure out how accurate a localizer is, that's a decent representation of it. So hopefully that video is going to give you guys a little bit of insight as to what navigating inside of Flight Sim 2024 looks like. It's a little bit more in depth than what you receive in the tutorial for Flight Sim 2024. And hopefully that helps you guys out and makes your simming a little bit more enjoyable. Like I said, I'm going to have another one that I'll put up here for short-range navigation. And we'll be doing another leg out of Jackson and going over to Meridian, Mississippi. So that one will be coming up soon. Hope you guys like this one. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your guys' support. It's always a lot of fun to make these videos for you and hopefully help the Flight Sim community grow and become a little bit more knowledgeable about how aviation works and kind of what we do on a daily basis. So thanks for watching, and until next time, happy simming, and we'll see you guys later.